Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and in today's video we're going to be discussing a pretty interesting and sort of polarizing topic, and that's going to be the gray market. Now, with so many different feelings associated with the market, I'm going to go ahead and give you a nice little disclaimer that I'm not either encouraging you to use the market, nor am I encouraging you to avoid the market. I'm just going to talk about it. But for those of you that don't know what the market is, the gray market is a place where people buy and sell ships on Star Citizen that's actually hosted on a subreddit called Star Citizen Trades. Now, most people are there looking for limited ships or LTI ships, but there's a lot more that goes on there, like the sale of subscriber items and even whole accounts. But I think to really understand the market, you need to know the origins of the market, and it seems to date back to July 18th of 2013 when RSI made an announcement on their forums prohibiting the buying and selling of ships. That post ended up reading, "From today forward, moderators will close any for sale, for trade, or want to buy post and issue warnings. Repeated warnings will earn forum bans. Now, for those purchasing used packages elsewhere, be aware that is at your own risk." So the gray market was then created one day later with the intention to try and provide people with a place to conduct this type of business out in the open. Prior to this point, most of these sales were done on eBay, which typically resulted in less buyer and seller interaction, and the price gouging could even be pretty severe. And I think it's easy enough to see that the market from the community perspective, where a lot of people have some pretty strong feelings about it, but to get a different perspective, I wanted to interview several of the larger resellers and the dealers on the market to try and get their insight that you probably wouldn't get otherwise. Some were okay with their names being used out in the open. Others wanted to remain anonymous as they were afraid that people are going to kind of take some of those misgivings about the market out on them in the universe. So I'm just going to leave their names out of it because ultimately it doesn't really matter. Just know that I targeted most of the large sellers and dealers on the gray market. So the motivation to become a seller and an active member in the gray market seems to have taken a few different forms, but there are a few trends. Most of the bigger sellers started out as shoppers who were looking for the LTI ships that were unavailable to them at the time. And the experience for them early on wasn't great, as the markups were incredibly high. And while it was hard for them to bite the bullet and buy the ship, it did show them that there was a way to make money in this, thus converting several of the sellers into the other side of the coin and to become sellers. Now, that LTI demand was a reoccurring theme because coming in to get an LTI ship was the goal for many to enter the market. But seeing how high the demand was made it pretty clear that they wanted to get in on that as well. Now, things are changing in today's world with LTI, though. When you talk about things like the Archimedes, which most look at it as an LTI token, and the new CCU paths to upgrade into other ships. So if you have an LTI P-72, you can turn that into an LTI Carrack if you want. That LTI demand is starting to waver and lowering prices on the market a bit. Others went into the market as dealers because they wanted to try and help people. And I'm sure some of you are going to be rolling your eyes at that a bit, but there does seem to be at least a little bit of sincerity there. And some of those who overspend and regret it later, the buyer's remorse kind of kicks in, or maybe real life gets in the way. These sellers wanted to try and provide people a way to unload their assets and recoup some of their losses. Providing a service to people isn't limited to real life, though, as many of these sellers are actually viewing these online stores almost as an early role-playing game, so they can kind of carry that character into the Star Citizen universe. They have aspirations of being ship dealers in space, and starting in the market now lets them to kind of begin to create this character and really start their business. Becoming a well-known trader provides people with a bit more security when dealing with transactions that, frankly, can be kind of scary to do. I mean, if you think about it, you're dealing with some unknown entity on the internet and you're trading real money for a virtual item. So it's not a great situation. And there absolutely is risk to the buyer, but dealing with someone who has had a lot of successful trades in the public can kind of help to put your mind at ease a little bit when you're going through one of these transactions. So ship sales are going to happen, so trying to make it as safe as possible for all parties is a relatively noble reason to be in there. And finally, playing as the character and role-playing the dealer now gives people the chance to do what they enjoy. And that's interacting with people in the gray market. You know, it can help to pass the time, it can keep people involved in Star Citizen world without burning out on the limited release of the game we have now, and just kind of gets them interacting with the community as a whole. So just like there's a lot of reasons for these folks to have become sellers, there's a lot of reasons that people are continuing to do it. And as expected, some are very focused on turning a profit. They see the demand for these limited ships and they want to try and capitalize on it. The supply is low, the demand is high, and therefore there's an opportunity for profit. You know, I mentioned some people overspend and need to offload some of those assets a little bit ago. That's the case for at least two of these folks that are big market dealers now. They spent so much money on the game that they felt guilty with real life responsibilities and how much they actually spilled into this game. And this was a way for them to help kind of recoup some of that investment and feel better about what they've done. But the trend, and it felt genuine, was that most people are not here for the money. They like playing the part of the dealer, and they like feeling like they're helping people by providing a safe place to get the assets that they want and couldn't really get anywhere else. Now, one thing I was curious about when doing my research was if CIG's ever shown any negative treatment or if they've provided any pressure to those in the market, and the answer was a unanimous no. There's a few that mention that CIG customer service is less inclined to help you with certain requests if they know that you're involved in the market, but those same people also mentioned that they understood why that would be the case. It seems like they all felt that CIG wants to kind of stay clear of the legalities that are kind of associated with these types of transactions, specifically with potential scams, which is why they stopped it on their site. But they feel that CIG understands that the market is not going to stop, and it almost takes a neutral approach on the topic, thus the name of gray market versus black market. One of the dealers even mentioned that they've caught some scammers that were potentially causing CIG some harm. They ended up turning that information over to CIG, and CIG seemed to be genuinely appreciative of being provided with that data so they can then proceed forward however they saw fit. The general impression of the gray market amongst the community seems to be incredibly mixed, and it seems that the vast majority appears to be very neutral on the topic. They're aware of the market, but they don't really care one way or another about it. Some are very happy that it exists. They enjoy the interactions and the ability to get what they want. Others see the market, specifically the larger dealers, almost as profiteers who are trying to scam people into paying exorbitant prices. The dealers seem to think that the criticisms come from a lack of knowledge or even kind of jealousy in a way, but I'm sure that people have their reasons. I mean, there is a big risk when you're dealing with non-official websites and people you don't really know, but that doesn't seem to account why people seem to dislike the resellers specifically. And I think that most of that disdain comes from people thinking that the dealers are stealing money from CIG. However, that appears to be at least a little bit of a false complaint, though there is certainly some truth associated with that. Since CIG isn't refunding any of these ships, they aren't really going negative on these transactions. I mean, it's not the same as a seller being forced to keep their ship and the buyer then buying a new one outright from CIG. But with limited ships and now the buyback options that are available in the hangar, some of the more exclusive and more expensive items that are being purchased for a second time to be sold means more profit for CIG. Also, the larger dealers have to replenish their stocks to have availability for people to purchase, and oftentimes that means that when there's a limited concept sale that comes up, they're buying like crazy to ensure they can meet that need down the line. Several of the dealers even mentioned that 100% of their profit ends up going back to CIG in some form, whether that be through a subscription, building their own personal fleets, some are buying physical merchandise. One way or another, those folks are actually making sure that their money's going back to CIG. Not everybody is going to be that noble. Some sellers are there just to look for money, and some are flat out going to mention it. They know they can turn a profit, and they're going to do whatever they can to maximize that. But the consensus seems to be that most are turning that money back to CIG. With all that being said, there are some very real concerns that buyers need to be aware of to protect themselves, and for some, it just may not be worth the risk of dealing with this environment. There's scammers on the market, and that can manifest in several different ways. For some, that's the promise to send a ship after the money has been sent, and it just never gets sent. For others, and in more severe circumstances, a trader can sell a ship that was actually considered a stolen item. The credit card company then charges back to CIG. CIG has a record of all the ships that have through some sort of virtual asset tag, meaning that CIG then has to recoup their losses by reclaiming their goods, meaning that whoever ended up buying that ship can end up without a ship to speak for. The dealers mentioned that CIG in the past has allowed people the opportunity to buy that ship again going through customer service, but that's not guaranteed, and the buyer has to purchase that ship twice. That situation sucks, but it is a real danger, especially with people hacking accounts and conducting business that way. Take this next bit with a little bit of a grain of salt because they obviously have a dog in the fight, but when I asked the dealers how buyers can protect themselves, they said to shop big dealers. Now, there is merit to that because when you consider that they trade openly and have a feedback system on the market to see how many successful trades they've had completed, not to mention you can go back and see their history, there is a little bit more there that you can go on. Big sellers also seem to have more experience dealing with scammers, so they can, they kind of had this ability to be able to spot them a little bit easier because they've had those situations in the past and hopefully can avoid those in the future. They also advise to avoid overspending, and that can come in two different forms. One is that there's some dealers that just charge way more than others, so you really should be doing your homework. Go and see the different stores that are available to make sure that you're actually getting a good price. The other is just about buying too many ships. With all the available ships on the market, it's really easy to fall into a pattern of just buying everything because you can, and that's something that turned a lot of buyers into sellers because they had to recoup some of their losses. Buying from unverified sellers can be dangerous, so make sure that you're trading using an invoice through PayPal. Now, it costs a little bit more to do, but it gives you more documentation to fall back on in the event of a scam. Now, trading with friends and family PayPal payments, it can save you a few bucks, but it may not be worth the risk in the end, and most of the dealers don't even like to do business that way because it's just risky for all parties involved. And speaking of documentation, people tend to be very weary of the market, meaning that they prefer to kind of operate in the shadows when conducting their business. Remember, CIG is fairly neutral on the topic, or at least we think they are, but dealers advise people to trade in the open to kind of help protect you and to kind of bring potential to kind of bring attention to potentially bad situations or scams. And the last piece of advice that was given was to be wary of deals that are too good to be true, because they mostly are. New accounts and first-time sellers with no Reddit history should be a red flag. If you're nervous about the transaction and want another party involved, you can hire a middleman for a fee on the market to help kind of conduct the trade for you. What these people do is they're actually assuming the risk on your behalf not necessarily completely, but for the most part, and they kind of have experience with these trades, so hopefully they can kind of help to protect you some. It sounds like the number of scams is actually really low. The number I've heard a couple times is less than 1%, according to the stats that are kept by dealers. But you absolutely need to be careful because just spending money and not getting anything for it is a really bad situation. But it's not just the buyers that are at risk in these market deals, because sellers have to be careful of these scammers as well. They take on the risk of buyers completing a deal and then charging back the transaction, which is going to result in the dealer being out funds. Many new backers are also reaching to the market to get their ships and goods, but being new, that also means that most of these folks don't have a Reddit history, which puts the seller at a greater risk. And finally, with the LTI becoming less rare thanks to ships like the P72 becoming essentially an LTI token, the prices on ships on the market are beginning to fall, which means that the profit margins for sellers are beginning to fall as well. And if they end up in a scam and take a financial hit, it's harder for them to make up that difference. Basically, it's becoming a little bit more dangerous for them to continue to conduct business on the market. So we've mostly talked about gray market sales, which is selling of ships and goods, but there is the black market side as well, which is the sale of whole accounts. And that is against the TNC CIG's laid out for us. Now, most of the dealers don't do black market sales because there's so much risk associated with it, since the original owner can write CIG and try and recover that whole account. The big reason that most dealers don't like to do black market deals, though, is because it's against the terms of service, and they try and show respect to CIG by following the rules that have been given. They know they've got some wiggle room from CIG with the gray market deals and don't really want to do anything against their wishes. Now, the future of the market's going to be interesting to watch, especially as players can kind of start to earn ships in-game. It is likely that the market's going to continue, and we're actually probably going to start seeing players selling ships that they've earned with in-game currency for real money on the gray market, unless CIG finds a way to prevent that from actually happening. Now, I could see the market slowing down because people want to or can earn their stuff through in-game efforts, but there's always going to be people looking for a shortcut, so we could see the opposite be true. Only time and the direction from CIG is really going to let us know what that's going to look like. But I think the bottom line when it comes to the gray market is that there's a lot of impressions about the market, some of which are accurate, some are not, and everyone is going to have a different perspective based on their own experiences. Now, I personally haven't done a lot on the market, but I'd be lying to you if I said that I haven't done anything there either. For me, I've had good experiences. Again, there's only been a couple, but your mileage may vary, and it's really going to be up to you on how well you kind of protect yourself in that situation if you do go that route. So if you choose to do business here, whether that be as a buyer or a seller, I just want to encourage everyone to be safe and keep yourself in good situations. So that's going to be it for now. I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of different view into this different side of the game that we've all come to love, just because it's different and it's interesting. So either way, if you've got more questions on this, I'm happy to go back and try and get you answers or to do a follow-up video. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys watching. Stay tuned for more, and I'll catch you guys soon. Take care.